Hello, my most amazing artists. How are you today? So my 4G students are going to be looking at the work of a very interesting American artist. His name was Horace Pippin, and this is one of his paintings that we are going to look at today. I also want to tell you, if you haven't read the lesson yet, that one of the reasons Horace Pippin is so interesting is because not only was he an American artist, but he also was a World War I veteran. And so in history class, as you were learning about how hard it was to be a soldier in World War I, how they had to basically fight from these muddy trenches without any of the comforts of home. Horace was one of the people that had to deal with that reality when he was overseas fighting with the Americans to defeat the German army. And so he actually got wounded in World War I. He got shot in the shoulder, and he then had a very hard time painting because he couldn't move his arm correctly. He ended up for the rest of his life painting by holding his hand with his left hand so that he could support the movement that he was doing while he was painting. So Horace Pippin was a story of perseverance and of bravery and creativity and all of those things that I admire. So as you look at the lesson today, I want to make sure that you took a moment to look at one of the books that I uploaded. I read this book, A Splash of Red, and that's uploaded in my section about Mrs. Rose Reads to You. This is all about Horace Pippin's life, so take a look at that video too. All right, so I'm going to show you some of his paintings, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. The painting we're looking at right now is entitled The End of the War, Starting Home. And this was actually the first painting that Horace Pippin gained any kind of fame for. He worked on this painting for 3 years and put layer after layer of paint on that painting. I think I read that it was over 100 layers of paint. So when he was finally done with it, he also made the frame. He did these little sculptures of some military pictures around the edge. In your studies of World War I, maybe you spent some time talking about the tanks that were invented. So I see the tanks on the top and bottom here on the frame. And I also wanted to point out that one of the things he was famous for is that he would put a splash of red in many of his paintings. So what that means is, like, a lot of his paintings were done with these very neutral gray brown colors, but then somewhere in the painting he would put a bright color to draw attention to that object. And so in this painting you can see that that happens with the flaming airplane that's dropping out of the sky and some of the explosions in the background here. Now I want to show you another couple pictures. This is one of my favorite ones that really has that splash of red. I love that bench that that man is sitting on. And it just shows kind of a peaceful scene. You've got a little animal in the background here. The man looks relaxed. You've got these two little benches here. One in the background, you can tell because it's smaller, and one in the foreground. And that red just really stands out. All right, another one with a little splash of red right here. This is called The Sleepers. And this again is just a really cozy kind of home feeling, but he's got this awesome little quilt folded up at the end of the bed here, and on the quilt are these little red fabric patches. So that's another example of that. And one more here. I don't know if you've talked about this yet in history class, but one of the ways that the American people supported their soldiers when they were fighting overseas during World War I and also later during World War II is they would plant these gardens, and they were called victory gardens. And that just meant that people were planting their own vegetables so that they could can them or, save the food, and that means that the government had more food to send overseas to the soldiers. So people were planting their own gardens, and they had flowers and vegetables, and they just did a lot more homemade type of things. And I love how this again has that splash of red, where these flowers right here are so bright and beautiful. Now, he didn't do that in every single painting he did, but that was just one of his trademarks. So today in our art project, we are going to do a picture that will have a splash of red. You have 3 choices. Let's talk about it. So I almost forgot to talk about this painting with you. This is the one from our curriculum. It's called Victorian Parlor 2. And I think this one's interesting because he doesn't put any people in it. It's just a painting that shows the inside of a house. And he really did like to focus a lot of his subjects on just how the home felt. And so in this picture, you see some splashes of red also. I love these 2 little vases here that are bright red, and of course some of the flowers in the middle. I have some questions for you about this picture on your homework sheet, so make sure you talk about those with somebody. But I want to point out, even with this picture, that there are some interesting frames here that look kind of like the frame that he made for his first painting about the war. All right, I also want you to really notice the symmetry in this painting. So in math class, you've probably talked about symmetry and how if you draw a line right down the middle, what balances out on each side. Now, they're not exactly the same, but he's got, one painting here and one painting there, a chair and a chair, a bookcase and a table. This is a very symmetrical painting. Okay, so your 3 choices today are that you can find a scene around your home or outside that you could just sit down and draw to the best of your ability. But then when you're done drawing it, like with pencil, I would want you to pick one object or one person or one thing in your picture and use a red marker or red paint to make that item red. So that's your first choice. Your second choice is that you can take a photograph of a scene, change it to black and white with a editing choice, and then print it out, and then pick one item in that photograph to color or paint red. I'm going to show you that option. I also gave you the option of drawing a scene, and I gave you step-by-step directions for drawing like a forest scene with a path, and then you can think of something to draw on that path that you will make bright red. So I'll show you that option as well. Okay, so with the option where you're working on your phone, first of all, if you need to go take a photo, you can do that. Try to take a photo of something where you've got either multiple people in it or multiple objects in it so that you can pick one to paint red. So I'm going to choose a photo that I took a while back at the Minneapolis Sculpture Garden, and it's got my kids and our friends in the picture, and I want to change it to black and white with a filter. And so I go to the word edit. Now this is an iPhone, so your phone might work differently, but basically it's a similar idea. And when I edit the photo, I need to choose a different kind of filter. So that's, and on this phone, it's this one with the 3 little circles. And if I scroll this down, I can find the black and white filters. So there's a black and white one. That one's a little more drastic, and that one's darker. So I'm going to go with the first one. And then I just press done. Now I need to print this photo out so that I can color something red. So I am going to do that by going to a different program where I upload it and then print it out. Okay, so I uploaded my photo to one of my printer apps. And so this is something that, you'll need to ask your parents for help about how to print something off of your phone. And so this would, only be a choice if you have the technology and the help to get this printed at home. So I'm going to go ahead and print mine from my phone to my printer. Okay, now I have printed out my picture, and my last step is that I am supposed to choose something on my photo to add a splash of red to. So I'm just going to use my red tempera paint. I think paint will probably show up the best when you're trying to paint over something. A red permanent marker might be good, but paint will be the best. So of course, what else but this beautiful cherry should be red. And so I'm going to paint that. And I have to decide if I'm just gonna paint the actual round cherry, or if I also want to do something with the stem. So I want it to mostly be red, but if you have to add another color just to make it look right, then you can feel free to do that. But the main part of it should be red. I'm putting the paint on pretty thick because I want it to cover up the gray printing that I had there before I painted it. So I'm going to add just a little bit of brown paint to the stem to kind of make it look like it's finished off. So when you're picking a photo to do this project with, it's important that you pick a photo that the thing that you're going to paint red makes sense. You know, it doesn't have to be something that was red already, but it has to make sense. So I was looking at one of my pictures of a beautiful winter scene, and it had a pine cone on it, and I thought, oh, I wish I could paint that pine cone red and make that stand out. But I thought, that wouldn't really make sense. If there was a bird in the picture or something like that, then it would make sense. All right, there is my finished picture. Now you might think this was extra easy because all I did was paint a little bit of red and a little bit of brown, but as you remember from our project with photography, getting the right photo is also a form of art. So make sure you use a photo that has a lot of artistic quality to it. All right, if you want to try a different project, the one where we're going to draw a forest scene, then I'll show that in part 2 of this video.